we have here 5 presenters and presentations that have been made available to you on the MEIEA website. I'm Dr. Stan Renard from the University of Texas at San Antonio. I'll be co-moderating this panel with my colleague Terry Tompkins from Hofstra University, who will be fielding the questions that will be directed to you. The rule of the game will be that we have just about 10 minutes per presentations for Q&A. This is not meant to be a summary of the presentations since they've been made available. It's meant for the viewership to be able to ask you questions about your respective works. So since I have not everyone here yet, but some of you, I'd like to start with Professor and Dr. David Allan from St. Joseph University. Welcome, Dr. Allan.
Thank you.
So I'll start by asking the first question, so it gives Terry a chance to start, popping the questions into this live webinar. So I guess my first question is, Dr. Allan, do you have any online audio branding resources that you could share with folks viewing this panel who will be interested in integrating audio branding in their curriculum as well?
Yeah, so great. Thanks to be here. Honored to be with the rest of the panelists today and all the guests. Hey, Terry. So I teach at St. Joe's. I'm the chair of the marketing department. I teach music marketing at St. Joe's. I obviously, that course is music is fully integrated to marketing and branding, but I also teach marketing communications, and within that, I teach in the branding chapters. I typically teach audio branding. I have a website myself called Marketing Musicology, and that has a lot of this on there. I'm writing a book about audio logos, plug, that's coming out called Supersonic Logos, and that will have an accompanying podcast. So anyone that has any interest at all in it should email me or call me, and I'd be more than happy to run it through. I'm a big advocate of getting audio branding incorporated into a wider range of classes. Typically, it's different when you're at a place like Belmont that's all in on this kind of stuff, but when you're at a business school just teaching principles of marketing or consumer behavior, it'll depend on probably the professor, maybe the student who has an interest in it, but I think it should be fully integrated, and for so many reasons. Mainly, it's fun.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Allan. Terry, do you have any questions coming in?
No questions just yet.
Okay, so I'll keep going, I guess. So you mentioned a book coming up on audio branding and audio logos in particular. Do you have a very well published author? I've enjoyed reading a lot of your papers, and from your expertise, I think a lot of folks could get a lot of insight from you into publishing, and maybe are there any outlets out there to publish, maybe particularly for audio branding?
Well, a very long time ago, Dr. David Stewart, who some of you may know, who teaches Loyola Marymount, and wrote a book of the effectiveness of 1,000 commercials, and in there he had a really small part about music and advertising, and I've cited it 1,000 times. And I saw him one time at a conference, and the geek that I am was like, oh my God, you're Dr. Stewart, blah blah blah. I just got into the academia. I'm going to be publishing this and I'm going to be publishing that. Why don't you publish anything on music and advertising anymore? He goes, you'll learn. Journals don't want that. He goes, it's too soft for the hard journals and too hard for the soft journals. You'll never get tenure. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to get tenure. But I did. And I worked around it. I think that the journals now, especially the journal that Bruce has been a great outlet for this kind of stuff. For the marketing journals, they're a little reluctant with qualitative research. A little bit more in if you can add a quantitative part to the research and testing this kind of stuff. The audio branding has some press out there, meaning books that have dealt fully with it, but it still has been, I think, still difficult into getting into A-level marketing journals, at least, of anything that has to do with audio branding, and I think that's a shame. Journal of Advertising Research has been very good to me in putting this kind of stuff in, stuff that has, part practical, part theoretical. But you really have to work at it, and it's easier than it was when I started, but not as easy as it should be, I think. So,
thank you. That's really useful information for us. I did dabble a little bit with audio logos, and I was fortunate to be able to publish something with CMS, especially because I was looking for something that allowed me to embed tracks and movable images and so forth. And not many journals allow for that. Do you have any outlets like that allow us to publish in a more dynamic format?
No, and I was talking with another colleague the other day, and it's a shame that most journals are so static, and that in today's world that you can't go on their websites and all that kind of stuff and find audio with the words. It really is sort of mind-boggling. But and back to your original question, I've had pretty good success of going to journals and saying, I see that you published X, Y, and Z articles about X, Y, and Z. Well, here's another one of those articles. So they initially don't get right back to me and go, we don't publish this kind of stuff. I've also had pretty good luck at special issues of all kinds. There's one currently out now about retail, and as it relates to music, could relate to music, and getting in pretty early on these guest editors and saying, hey, I got this idea, what do you think? And if they tell me I think it's a great idea, then by the time I've submitted, they told me 6 months ago that I was in. And some of them don't remember whether they told me that or not, and some of them follow through on it. But the good thing, I think, that although it doesn't help you publish more, I think that popular press has really come full circle on audio and audio branding and all this kind of stuff. And to find people around the world that have like this conference and this organization that have welcomed it, especially from an academic standpoint of actually being a pedagogy and not just a hobby. I think that has helped us to rise to the level that I think that we deserve.
Thank you. I guess we almost running out of time. I don't see any questions on Terry's end. Is there?
I have a question here, Stan.
Okay.
We have a question. How is audio branding changing to adapt to new platforms, Dave, like social media and other various platforms?
Yeah, so with technology and smart speakers, it's really taken off. I'm doing some stuff with MasterCard, and MasterCard has just come out with a new strategy and not just an audio logo, because people in the field get very mad when you think that audio branding is just audio logo. I guess it's sort of like the branding people when you say, oh, it's just about your logo. But with MasterCard now, it's not just like an Apple Pay where you run your credit card in a store. You're going to say to Alexa, use my MasterCard, and the audio logo is going to be is going to come out of your smart speaker. So, and because we're, everyone's found audio again with smart speakers and technology, I think more than ever, it's the way of the future when it comes to a brand that wants to brand itself. And it's not just, before it was sort of like, well, Coke is nice and Converse is cool and that kind of stuff. But, when MasterCard and people like that go all in on this kind of strategy, because the card itself can trigger the logo. And then, MasterCard has done different themes of it and different in reggae and hip hop and EDM and that kind of stuff. I think that is really going to be, the next level for brands, and brands that do not take audio branding seriously are going to be left behind. It's clear.
Wonderful, thank you. I think that this is all the time we have for you, Dr. Allan. But if you have other questions for Dr. Allan, if you could maybe archive them and then we could maybe share them with you, if you don't mind, David.
Yeah, great. It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. I guess I'll move on to Dr. Marcus Thomas. And you work on building a teamworks, and this work going all across the Hartt School of Music in Hartford. I guess I have a few questions. One, I watched your video a few times, and I don't think I caught when the study was done, which semester or which year.
I do have my audio on, correct?
Yes, you do.
Oh, great. We were fortunate in a way, actually, because we got together as a collaborative FLC in the spring of 2019, and we all ran our studies across the fall. I say we were fortunate because we were able to get the data over the winter in January, just before we all got ushered off campus. So we were able to at least get everything compiled and put together. So the surveys were completed roughly a year ago, fall of 2019, most of us in the months of October and November.
Terry, do we have any questions for Dr. Thomas?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, great. So I guess my initial question of asking you when it was done yields the next one. From what you've learned, especially in your classroom, teaching arts management and performing arts management, do you have any advice for any of us, especially for most of us, moving into an online teaching modality and how to build groups and foster teamwork?
Yeah, that's going to be I found it to be tricky, to be honest with you, because so many of us just innately have group work or teamwork built into our syllabus, group exercises, this sort of thing. But I'll take it into account. Have we taken the time to teach students to work collaboratively? In the classroom, you've got contact. You've got students that are there face to face. Online, that's going to be a little trickier, I think, to build real group cohesiveness and dynamics. The suggestion, I think, would be to start building in or threading in collaborative exercises early in the curriculum, not just necessarily in the classroom. For example, in our program, students in performing arts management will take management and organizational behavior, but it doesn't come up until the third year of their program. And so by that point, they've been thrown into group project after group project without really learning how do I handle the dynamics. So now the goal will be to create a module in the intro class that has nothing to do with music business per se, but everything to do with group dynamics and team building to start priming the pump, and then thread that throughout the courses along the way. So by the time they get to their third year, by the time they get to practicum and all these other courses, they're well adapt to working with one another. As to the online component, again, I think that's going to be a bit tricky because there you're dealing with two things, not just designing collaborative exercises, but how do you do that in an online world in a way that's a little more than just superficial, FaceTime or Skyping. And I don't have a direct answer for how we're going to prep students to do both of those, to be honest with you. what we found, at least in the qualitative data, were that students who were already somewhat familiar with each other reported higher levels of group satisfaction. Those that were not were the ones that tended to be more critical. Adding the online component just spreads that unfamiliarity, I think, a bit further in some ways. And so we'll have to find ways to get students to do these sorts of, getting to know you exercises. In person, you could do things like, go out to the park and do team races and all those sorts of things that are unrelated to the actual exercise, but relate to building a human bond. I honestly don't have an answer how we're going to do that virtually, to be honest with you.
Terry, do you have any questions for?
Well, I actually have a question. After watching your presentation, when students are entering into the real world, they don't really get to choose who they work with. So, what would be your response to sort of not having that option, and how to prepare them in that regard?
No, I think that's a part of what led us to that revelation. Because in my class in particular, I had I had five groups, excuse me. There were 3 groups of students who self-selected, so they knew one another, and the other 2 I composed them. So that's much more like the real world, where you don't necessarily know who you're going to be working with. You're not necessarily familiar with one another. So it may behoove professors to just self-select the groups from the professor's perspective, to start getting students used to the idea that I will be working with people that I don't necessarily know. We've probably all had this experience where, you introduce a group project in the syllabus the first week of class, second week of class, and the very first expression from everyone is, "Oh, group project. Do we have to do a group project? Can I do it by myself?" And then after they get over that initial shock, it's, "Hey, you," right? And they're looking around the room to see all the people that they know. And I want to be in your group. I got my group, because there's this familiarity. But you're right. In the real world, we don't get to do that. So one suggestion might be to just have projects where the professor self-selects or selects different students, and also look to select students across, for lack of a better word, for diversity, but all sorts of diversity. And this class happened to be an intro course, so most of them are going to be first-year students. But if it's, say, a course that's 200-300 level, perhaps there are some students that are juniors, others that are sophomores. In this intro class, some of them are music and performing arts management. Some are taking it as an elective. They may be in a college of engineering or college of business, making sure that I pull in people from different perspectives, different disciplines, if you will, diversifying it again, maybe by gender, by race even, on purpose. So students get used to what the real world looks like. That would be my suggestion for getting around this sort of, halo effect.
We had one more question, which was regarding assessment, peer review. Are your students doing self-assessment and assessing each other, and how do you go about that?
This assignment, they had to do both. So at the end of, they did a pre-survey where they gave their ideas on, group work in general, based on the last project that they'd done. So it wasn't necessarily in this class that they were in at this semester. And then at the end of our project, they did another post-survey, and they had to evaluate themselves, but also all of their group members as well. The 11 questions that we went through on a Likert scale were all, the same across all of our disciplines, but we also had open-ended questions where the students could then write in their, evaluation of one another. And again, those students that had familiarity tended to be a little more favorable in their qualitative assessment, but they also use the same sorts of, I don't say generic, but the same sorts of terms to describe everyone. Team player, awesome, great attitude, and it was kind of, consistent. Those that were less familiar were quite a bit more critical, and not necessarily in a pejorative manner, but, really getting into constructive criticism of their peers on individual characteristics. And they also tended to look at personality a little bit more. So we saw a bit more of they're shy or they're bossy or those kinds of things in those assessments. Now, the the peer assessments and the student assessments were not factored into the grade for the project or the course. And in fact, when they were giving their assessments, they were expressly told that they wouldn't be turned in until after the course was over. And the instructors, in fact, we did not see it until the grades were completed. So we got the data over the winter break after grades were turned in. So that kind of removed the fear of maybe being harshly graded on their comments. So I take it to be their genuine comments and their genuine assessments, since there shouldn't have been the fear of retribution.
Wonderful, thank you, Dr. Thomas. I think this is all the time we have for your portion of the Q&A. If we end up with a little bit extra buffer time at the end of this session, maybe we'll be able to field in some extra questions to all of you. So I guess I'd like to move to the Bonaroo presentation next. And I see that we have both faculty members involved in this project. And welcome to both of you, Sarita and Ken.
Right, yes, thank you. We're so glad to be here today to talk to everybody about this project.
Super. So I'm sure we'll have lots of questions, coming your way. My first one is, how did you form this interdisciplinary partnership between music industry and sociology? How did that come together?
Ken, do you want to take that first? I just wanted to work with the coolest professor on campus, personally. He gave me a lot of street cred. As you can tell, I'm a middle-aged, white, Caucasian woman. So I'm working with a guy that used to be a BMX bike racer with a mohawk and big glasses gave me super cred immediately.
Well, I had created, I started a sociology of music class with my mentor in graduate school, and it was the first sociology of music class created in the US. And when I started at Belmont, I introduced a cultural sociology focus to really play off of Belmont having a music business program. So I had a sociology of music class in place, and it was part of the music business program years ago. And really, Dr. Stewart and I were walking back from a fall faculty workshop and discussing ways to collaborate and partner together. I did my part of my dissertation was looking at music scenes, and Bonaroo was one of them in the first 3 years of Bonaroo. So this is sort of a full circle for me to come back to this. I used to teach research methods, and Dr. Stewart was doing a methods course associated with this. So we really combined the two.
Yeah, and it just kind of built on what he said. I was being funny earlier, but really it was a way to create a fun way to actually teach consumer research, because what I found in teaching it is a lot of people have a lot of unnecessary fear about it. So to be able to combine this into a study abroad or study USA program where we can actually take a class and do basically field research was a really great opportunity. And to also be able to attend a festival and to see it, really from a back scenes perspective. I mean, we take 2 buses down there. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Jeff McCluskey, who helps us organize press tent interviews with music artists and executives. And I mean, he was a big, crucial part of this program, and it's been really successful.
Yeah.
I see that we have one question that has to do with cost. Beyond the registration cost for the course, is there additional cost to the students to have access to the buses and the festival and so forth?
Yes, the program cost is roughly $2,250, and that includes basically cost of a VIP ticket, obviously renting the bus for a week. We also take a pre-trip down to the farm, so we have to rent vans to go to the farm, and then food costs. And we basically, what we do, we're not allowed to give per diem, so we just give people food coins, which they can actually spend at the festival.
Yeah, and the way in which that works out, it's essentially they get 6 hours. So they have to sign up for both Dr. Stewart and my class, and they get 6 hours of university credit for free. So it's either a wash of you get a free Bonaroo experience and you pay for 2 classes, or you pay for this Bonaroo experience and you get 6 hours of college credit.
So, I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and so I'm really close to the whole South by Southwest scene here in Austin. And they already decided to move the entire festival online this spring. Is there any, some signs that maybe Bonaroo will have to do something similar next summer, or are they still waiting?
Well, they just announced their new dates next September. Unfortunately, because this is a May semester class or first summer one, because it takes place in June, and we basically focus on this for the whole month, we're not going to be able to attend Bonaroo because we generally wouldn't be allowed to do a class like this during a regular school session. But we're hoping for 2022, and we want to look at the course, kind of reevaluate some of its goals, bring on some international partners as well, so we can actually do cross comparisons across different regions of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you've done a lot of interviews, and are you planning to do some interviews with promoters who are working with online music festival or festivals that are moving into an online modality?
You want to take that, Sarita?
Yeah, I think that's actually would be a really interesting way to actually grow this project. I feel after looking at the results from the first 2 years, I think we found a lot of the results from year one actually were replicated in year 2. And I think that this could be a really interesting idea stand to actually follow up as we go into the 2022 session of the festival and this class.
Yeah, and I would say with regard to the press tent and the interviews that we do while we're at Bonaroo, we've had a lot of, after really the first 2 days of the first year, we had people coming up to us backstage asking to participate. And so when it came time for year 2, we really had a robust array of speakers. And I can't speak for Sarita, but I can say that I have had a lot of contact with some of the folks who we met with last year who have reached out to us to sort of continue this partnership and this relationship. So I do agree that it's a great idea.
And one thing I did want to say was they did Lalaiu this year, and Jeff actually worked on it with Dr. Daniel McKagan, who's actually at DePaul, who's chair of the communications department there. So it was really fun to see this taken more into a music business class, but a lot of the same principles being used.
Yeah. Sarita, we have a question. How would you advise other programs to launch these kind of initiatives? How do you make this partnership happen? And can you explain how you made it happen and how you advise other schools to maybe look at their local festivals to make something happen with their program?
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that. I belong to an organization called Leadership Music, which is a leadership organization here in Nashville. And Mr. Bonaroo, Jeff Kuehler, was actually in my leadership music class. So it came up one day and I was pitching him my idea about a way to go to a festival and to conduct consumer research, and would he be interested in pursuing this idea? And he was all in. So I think having the input of the festival promoter is going to be really key. And also I want to say that the guys at AC Entertainment from Ashley Caps on down have been really embracing of this as well, and have found it a really great way to come and speak to the students. And usually we have Ashley as one of our class speakers each year.
So I think this is pretty much all the time we have for your collective presentation or Q&A answers. But we might have perhaps a few minutes at the end again, and we'll field additional questions at this point. Thank you both so much. Sorry, I guess I'm going to go to our team from Sweden next. And talk about leadership skills tied to music production, and what you all three of you have learned about this project, and how you are applying that into the classroom in turn. So welcome, Jan Olof, David, and Peter.
Hi. Thank you very much, and thank you much for having us and that you do this conference. I think it's great with everything happening in the world. So thank you so much.
So I know that you've studied a couple of iconic music producers, with a couple of them from your home country who have released some incredible records over the years. From the study you've done, what have you learned from it, and how do you apply it back into the classroom? How do you transfer that back into how you teach your students?
Well, that's very interesting, and that's about the next part of this project. What we studied, for example, Max Martin and his mentor, Dennis Pop. Dennis Pop died 22 years back in cancer, but he was very important for Max Martin. And Max Martin, he's been a very successful music producer and songwriter. He won many prizes and had many hits, not at least in America. And when we compare what we have found out by interviewing, of course we haven't interviewed Dennis Pop, but he died, because of it died, but we interviewed lots of people around him, and we also have interviewed Max Martin, and we found some aspects very important for them, how they work. And when we compare that with models on leadership, we see it's easier for us to have a textbook about leadership and teach the students and stuff like that. But it's much more difficult to say, for example, with the Dennis Pop model, we say the love for music is the most important, one of the most important skills or ways to act or to strive to do things simple, or maybe how to collaborate with others. It's much more complex, and these skills are interwoven into each other in a different way. So that's a challenge to get that in the curriculum. Indeed, yes.
And you can see that we can see that a lot of the students, all students, I would say, or we all are looking for the magic key to make the best music, and to write songs, to produce music that reach out to a lot of people. And many of the students very often make this thing more complicated than they have to. And I think by working with these different keys that we found, then we can find new ways to make things easier. And it's not. I don't think it's new knowledge, but in some way, they make it more complicated, as I said.
Right, thank you. We have another question. Terry, do you want to read the question that just...
Sure, yeah. We have a question about how local culture might apply to their approach in the studio. So like Max being Swedish, what does that influence his approach in the studio? And is that transferable, across all boundaries?
Well, that's also a very good question, because I think, yes, definitely in one thing that I think is different in Sweden compared to maybe American, and I've been doing some production work in America too, where I find it more hierarchical. Is that correct? how do you say that? I'm sorry about my English. My Swedish is much better. I promise that.
You can take it in Swedish. Then.
Yeah, but it's for example, Max. When I interviewed his name is Martin, really, but you call him Max Martin. We were talking about when he produced Michael Jackson, and he started to ask him not to snap his finger. Please shut up, Mr. Jackson, to do this or that. And they said, you can't talk to him like that. Why not? We're trying to make a good record here. So that was his. So I think one of the keys for why many, not at least American artists, wants to work with Max Martin is that he treat a cleaning woman with the same respect as he treat a multi-million-dollar artist, and that's very interesting because that's how Swedes. I think you get more of that in the Swedish culture than you maybe get in the American culture or another culture. I'm not an expert on this, but that's, I think, one thing. And the first thing when I met for example, for this interview, he started to apologize. I've been walking outside without any gloves. I'm sorry if my hands are cold, but we shook hands. So you see, he's very concerned about the other person, and that's, I think, is the most important thing in maybe his work as a producer. But also one thing that he's got in common with Irving Berlin, who's also one of our subjects we have studied, is to work and then work to make success. It's all about working very, very hard to make success. And that's not magic. That's just common sense for most of us. But many students believe that they can maybe drink a bottle of wine and get some inspiration and make a fantastic song. And to conclude that many bottles of wine has been drunken without any new fantastic songs being written. So.
That's right. That's right. I found one aspect of your research really interesting is how you pointed out that there's such a high concentration of Swedish folks who are registered with your local collection society. How do you explain that you have so many, singer-songwriters and composers in Sweden?
Well, I think that's very. Maybe it's your field, that David, but I think it's very interesting, and also that. I think songwriting is very, very big in Sweden. That's the way it is. We have also municipal music schools, for example. Kids play all over the country. That's probably very important. I think popular culture is also very important in Sweden. Sweden is a small country, but there's been very much interested in, for example, British culture on television, pop music, and American culture and stuff like that. So we got also many immigrants coming from other parts of the world. So it's more or less a melting pot of different ideas. Maybe that's one explanation. What do you say, David?
Yeah, well, I agree. And also Sweden have... well, some explanations mean we have like cultural schools. We can play music after school, after hours at music schools. And we got these sort of setups where you can play on your spare time easily and so on. And Sweden was also very, took some advantage of the technology revolution with the computers in the 80s and early 90s, and Sweden is really well equipped with the computers and setups, so you can work with music on your computer and so on. So and companies like Spotify and such people. Yeah.
I think one more explanation is that some Swedish artists made it big worldwide. And if we go back for the first number one on the American Billboard Hot 100, Hooked on a Feeling with Björn Skifs back in 1974. At that time, it was almost impossible for an European band to be on top of that list because the American record companies wouldn't take a Swedish band. So he had to, his label EMI had to go via an independent label first and get signed in America. Then the American label promoted the record, and it was a hit. Today it's another thing, but I think since the mid 70s, and also there was a Swedish band called ABBA, you may have heard of, and they also made it big internationally in many countries, not only America, also in Australia, for example. And after that, there's been lots of bands showing it's possible to, the whole world is a market for the Swedish artist. And I think that's a difference with some artists from other countries who more see that France is their market, or maybe Brazil also. I'm not sure about that, but that may be one explanation as well.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for joining us. It must be late where you are right now, probably 7 hours time difference.
6 o'clock. 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, not so bad, I guess it's happy hour. You started way before us. But anyway, I want to thank you. We don't, unfortunately, we have so many panels, and I need to move to our last presentation. But, we'll certainly, if we have other questions, we'll make sure that they get to you and that you are able to answer them. So I guess now we are going to talk about Singalongs with Robert Wiley. Welcome, Robert.
Hi there.
I found your presentation very unique. I didn't even know Singalongs existed. That's a new thing for me. And I guess the first question I have, while other questions are filling in, is are these groups that you highlighted across the US that do these Singalongs? Are they like set up as nonprofits? Because I've seen that a lot of these shows happen in people's houses or in restaurants and so forth. And in terms of liability, I wonder if they have some kind of incorporation.
I don't know of any groups that do. I know there's a group in San Jose, and they're technologically savvy. They may have done it. I was just looking now, there's groups, at least one group in Stockholm doing ukulele sing-along, so they're everywhere. But they just gather in public, and I don't think people are worried about liability.
Also, I've seen that these are seems to be fairly private meetings. Do you also do public performances?
We have a group in Muncie, and we get together once or twice a month to play by ourselves in the public library. Anybody walking by can notice. But we've decided to share the joy, and we go out and support our favorite nonprofits and little businesses that we want to help. So we will go out and practice in public. We don't do real polished shows, but we will go and do our sing-along at a Books and Brew or an art walk out in the community.
That's useful information to know. I was going to, I've seen that a lot of amateurish ensembles are starting to, there's a trend for more of them to kind of pop up in different communities, including amateurish, orchestras and bands and mandolin orchestras and so forth. How do you explain this trend?
I think people are looking for ways to make music together. I was enjoying hearing what's going on in Sweden. I think as we move forward, people have more free time, aging populations, too much social media. People are looking for ways to connect, and playing in a musical group is such a satisfying experience and such a wonderful thing to do.
How did you get into this?
I went and visited my brother in Santa Cruz, California, and he took me to the beach there, and there were 50 people playing ukuleles together with a bass and a banjo or a violin or harmonica or two, and I just fell in love with the sound. There's nothing like hearing 50 people playing the good old nostalgic songs from my dating days, and the ukulele is such a great instrument. It's easy to learn, it's cheap, it doesn't drown out people who don't have trained voices, and it's just appropriate technology. And then just the joy of getting together with people and singing one song after the other. And by having a set list worked out in advance, you don't spend a lot of time in between songs trying to come to a group consciousness. You just finish one and you take a short break, and suddenly you're playing the next one. And it doesn't matter how good you are. It's not about sounding great. It's just the fun of doing it with other people.
The latest instruments I picked up was the mandolin, and that's similarly to the ukulele. It's also a cheap instrument that you can buy. You can get some that start at $50 or $100, and they're perfectly playable. Perhaps the learning curve is a little steeper than the ukulele, but how do you explain that? Different schools don't really teach these instruments. So if you say you want to learn a second instrument, or in a department of music or in a college, very few schools even teach mandolin or ukulele. How come?
Well, our school, we do teach it as a social instrument. There's the recorder and the ukulele, and they teach it in the elementary ed program. And there's a school in our town that got a grant to buy ukuleles for the students. So I think it's a lot more fun than playing the song flute. That's what I played in 4th grade. I can't imagine the poor teacher trying to listen to 30 kids playing song flutes all together. 30 ukuleles sound great. And there's the School of YouTube. You can learn it there, and you can pretty much pick it up yourself. It's such an easy instrument.
So do you have any advice for any folks who are watching this stream and are interested in joining, a sing-along group? What should we do?
Well, there's that idea of six stages of separation. I know now Michael Jackson through our Swedish colleagues here. Within 6 stages, I've met someone who's met someone who knows Michael Jackson. And I think with ukuleles, it's the noblest of instruments, and it has gone through different phases of popularity. And I think it's only one or a maximum of 2 stages of separation to somebody that has a ukulele in their closet that they aren't using. And you can get it, have them pull it out and start playing together with them, and just take it from there, just kind of snowball and get together with your family and friends. And there's probably a ukulele sing-along group or some dulcimer group or something in your community. You just have to find them, and if they don't have one, you start your own. So that's what I did.
Do we
have a question? Yeah.
Questions?
We have a question. Robert, the live concert industry has been devastated due to the pandemic, and we do have Dana Frank from First Ave and Neva speaking later. How has that impacted these groups that are getting together socially? Have you moved to an online component?
You can't really do it online because electrons, no matter how fast they travel, there's a time lag. So unfortunately, you can't jam with each other. We were meeting outdoors in a community garden, and some of the members didn't even want to do that. So we've just taken a long break, and I miss it terribly. And I wanted to just mention that I very successfully buried the lead of my research, which was I didn't get to till the very end. But I worked with some computer science students, and we created an app that synchronizes phones because we thought it was nice to use phones rather than iPads. Not everybody has an iPad. So you can rotate your phone and have as many people as you want synchronizing their phone screens. And we developed this app, and then our plan is to license the playing of lyrics through Hal Leonard, and be kind of like a clearinghouse like Harry Fox and the public rights organizations, because currently there's no good system to license lyrics because we don't need the melodies. The sing-along people don't read them. But the proposal at the end of the presentation was to have an app that's free, and you take subscriptions and you divide that money among the lyricists.
That's too bad that this project kind of fell the wayside. But we want to thank you, Robert, for sharing this with us. Is this something that you think will ever get any legs in a college scene?
Well, the 4 computer science students made this app, and I would like to find some songwriting students who would help go through the libraries that are out there of free lyric sheets and put the right chords in, and have a consistent bank of songs that people can use. So I think that way it's involved the students in training their ears to compare what they find in these websites to what the actual chords are.
Awesome, thank you.
Robert, we have one more question that we can wrap with from one of our attendees. He's asking about, you mentioned in the paper that Hal Leonard will administer royalties to composers. Can you talk about how the structure of that, how that works?
Well, I've talked with John Malinchek from Noteflight, and they have lots of deals worked out with publishers. I don't know how they've been able to do this thing where you can go on Noteflight and publish to make an arrangement of a song, and then you can post it, and the actual publisher gets the money for that. So I talked with John, suggested that they make an API so that we could search, third-party developers could search Hal Leonard's database, and then our app would match up how many times the lyrics have been displayed, and then we would divide up the pool, and then Hal Leonard, in principle, according to John, might be willing to take that money and divvy it up based on our statistics of usage. And they're in the best place to do that because they already have so many deals worked out with publishers.
Fantastic,
Awesome.
thank you.
Robert.
Dan,
So
I think we have 5 more minutes.
You do?
Yeah, we have I have a few more questions. I wanted to direct one to Sarita and Ken. So with field study, how are you assessing what the students have learned? And then I'm wondering, is that learning environment transferable? Can you take what they've learned and transfer it to the students who maybe didn't partake in that trip? You know, like there's only 20 or 30 that can go, but you have hundreds or thousands within your program. So can you talk a little bit about those two things?
Great. Yeah. Ken, feel free to step in too. So they conduct interviews, and we actually build this on theory, and last time we used production of culture theory. I think, I'm just trying to think, we do presentations to industry, and I think it is situational, but I'm really interested in getting into, I've been reading a lot of studies recently from like the areas of tourism and also some other disciplines where it looked like some of the findings were a little bit similar. So I do think that where we're seeing findings that are common across festivals, in terms of like making that situational across students that attended and not attended, I think other than an interest level at this point, maybe Kim, you want to step in on that one too. I mean, there was a lot of interest from others on the topic.
And I would say that when we did our presentations, the industry brought a lot of their second and third and fourth in charge. So we had a packed room of industry people. And they even asked us afterward if we could partner with them and do similar things. So absolutely, I think it's transferable. The methods portion of the course, we take them through steps that starts very early on, going to the CMT festival, the country music, or the CMA festival. And so they go down and do research there, come back, and we talk about that and work them through the steps.
Yeah, we have homework assignments that they do in conjunction as we prepare them to go to the festival. So by the time they go to the festival, there's always that apprehension of walking up and talking to people. But after you've gone through a CMA Fest, they feel very comfortable in a festival environment asking people questions, especially people their own age.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Dave Allan, question for you. We've got like 2 minutes left. Can you talk about the students' awareness of audio branding when you're teaching it, and what the takeaways are? And we kind of live in a different era, and how that's changed over the last 20 years.
Yeah, great question. Marketing students, probably not at all, but have high interest in it when they figure out. I'm a big proponent of students taking what they know, combining with what they like, and seeing somebody to pay them for it. So when that sort of opens up to, you mean I could do this with my major? It's a big thing. From the music marketing students who already have some type of awareness of music, and music and politics, and religion, and music and that kind of stuff, they have some awareness of it, but probably didn't know, when we talk about the Intel, logo, sound logo, and stuff like that, like, oh, so that's a whole field. And then that can become a little bit of a light bulb career thing also. And you know, a lot of students don't know what they don't know, and once they know it, then it becomes a real thing for them. I have business students, so even music and advertising is not looked at as my good friend Bethany Klein would call selling out. They're trying to monetize music and money and marketing. But so that's a good thing too. So I appreciate the professors, and I appreciate her obviously, that take the other side of this, because it provides for good debate at a conference between me and them. But I have to sort of work them into a frenzy, as she tried to do this week, to see that there might be bad implications of that. But yeah, I think that I think it's real eye-opening for them that, you know, kind of like maybe me especially, you know, I got my MBA in marketing and learned that stuff that I've been doing all that time had a name, and I might not have been doing it totally correctly. So I think that that's a little bit of my job, or our job, and sort of bringing that full circle for students.
Thanks, Dave.
I think this is pretty much all the time that we have for today's session, Q&A session on pedagogy and how we can apply your research into the classroom. It's been very informative. I want to thank all of you for participating in this and sharing your work with us. Thank you so much.